Let's make a deal. An LEA's provision of providing equitable services, ongoing consultation meetings, and shared collaboration with participating private nonprofit schools. This session is being moderated by Lenitra Guess with the Texas Education Agency in the Federal Program Compliance Division, June 1st, 2023. The session will provide guidance to LEAs on increasing the success of collaborative and ongoing consultation meetings with private nonprofit schools receiving equitable services. Participants will hear how to make a deal during ongoing consultation meetings by focusing on federal program requirements, PNP needs, priorities, program plans, students, and staff. Successful collaboration and newly developed TEA resources and tools can help make a deal that leads to increased student achievement and staff development while supporting PNP needs and measurable outcomes. This presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to Texas Education Service Centers, local educational agencies, and private school officials, and reflects the Texas Education Agency's current understanding of the ESA statute and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of ESA programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and participants are, therefore, advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance. Today's agenda includes an overview of TEA's statewide private school equitable services, TEA PNP Ombudsman's role and support, Let's Make a Deal, collaborative and building partnerships of support, effective consultation, collaboration, and expected outcomes, carryover of equitable services, new and updated PNP resources, frequently asked questions, upcoming training sessions. Overview of TEA, statewide private school equitable services. The private school program participation data for 2021 through 2022 may be seen on this slide. As you can see, the Title I Part A program services provided 11,294 students services within 133 private school campuses. The Title II Part A program for equitable services showed PNP staff that were served at 128,031 staff members. Our largest part of participation for students is in the area of Title IV Part A equitable services, where we had 115,235 PNP students served during the 2021-22 school year. PNP Ombudsman role and support. The Ombudsman role is to provide technical expertise in interpreting, understanding, and implementing accountability requirements. It's also to address complaints regarding consultation and/or equitable services, to provide guidance and support for LEAs, private nonprofit schools, parents, and community. In addition, the Ombudsman role is to provide guidance to Texas Education Service Centers, ensure all equitable service reporting requirements are met, and to develop monitoring protocols. Ombudsman support is used to oversee state monitoring processes and procedures, collaborate with state fiscal and federal program compliance reviews and processes, consult with private, non-public organizations, participate in Title I Part A Committee of Practitioner meetings, collaborate and coordinate resources with the Texas Private School Accreditation Commission, known as TEPSAC, and also to address informal as well as formal complaints. The State Ombudsman Support complaint process requires a formal submission by a private nonprofit school. The complainant must document efforts that it used prior to filing the complaint. It must include supporting documentation in which the private school attempted to rectify issues with the public school. The private non-public official complaint is reviewed by the state ombudsman and a decision is delivered within 45 days. Collaborating and building partnerships of support. How do you encourage collaborative relationships among ESCs, LEAs, and PMP school officials? Do you spend time as an LEA visiting the PMP school campuses? Do you take time to view the equitable services programs and activities that are going on within the private school? What about making phone calls, sending emails to check in and see if the services are meeting their needs? These are just a few of the ways to encourage that collaborative work relationship among the stakeholders. Characteristics of a successful collaboration is that collaboration is voluntary. It requires parity among the participants. In this case, it would be the districts and the private school officials, and it's based on mutual goals. The mutual goal is we all want our students in both public and private schools to increase their student achievement and meet their educational outcomes, as well as the private school teachers and leaders to have mutual goals as well that they would be able to meet through collaboration. The collaboration depends on shared responsibility for participation in decision making among the LEA and private school officials. Individuals who collaborate share their resources, and those individuals that do collaborate together share accountability for those outcomes. That is why it's very important for LEA school officials and private school officials to work at having a successful collaboration from beginning through the end. Collaboration must be an ongoing partnership with the Texas Education Agency, education service centers, local educational agencies, and private schools. Collaboration with Equitable Services Workgroup members occur as well. TEA has developed a work group that is comprised of LEAs, non-public school staff, and educational service center staff officials. And these officials represent both rural and suburban areas. The goal is to build collaborative relationships with the diverse stakeholders across the state. It's important that information is shared with the TEA ombudsman in an understanding way, and that the TEA ombudsman receives workgroup suggestions and feedback on statewide initiatives, processes, and procedures prior to those documents and processes being shared across the state. There is an integrated system of statewide collaboration and support for equitable services. As you can see, there is a range of different stakeholders that are supportive and there to provide guidance and help for participating private nonprofit schools. And those other stakeholders that surround the private schools include the Texas State Ombudsman, LEAs and Education Service Centers, the Title I Part A Capacity Building Initiative, as well as the TEA Equitable Services Work Group. Collaboration with private schools are also very important. TEA's Commissioner of Education has recognized the accreditation responsibilities of the Texas Private School Accreditation Commission, known as TEPSAC, and its affiliated non-public schools and associations since 1986. Did you know that students' credits earned in the accredited non-public schools actually can transfer to Texas public schools? The state PNP Ombudsman is the liaison for TEA between the agency and the TEPSAC group. Collaboration with the private school commissioners through the Texas Private School Accreditation Commission. The primary purpose is to maintain private school accreditation standards, help to ensure quality in private schools by monitoring and approving organizations that accredit non-public Texas schools. And TEPSAC is comprised of commissioner representatives from 19 diverse private school accreditation agencies. The primary purpose of the Texas Private Schools Association is to protect the independence of private schools and parents' freedom to fulfill unique missions and meet the diverse needs of schools. Currently, statewide Texas organization represents more than 800 accredited private schools and over 250,000 students. Here is a sample agenda of TEA collaborating with the Equitable Services Workgroup members. In this particular session, workgroup session, we had presentations led by the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools staff, known as the TEA EANS staff. We also talked about the purpose of the Equitable Services Work Group. We had LEAs as well as private schools to share some of their successes that they've had throughout the year in working with Equitable Services and collaborating with one another. We also had private school Equitable Services updates, as well as having the TEPSAC director share private school legislative updates. So that just gives you a sample of what occurs during some of our Equitable Services workgroup sessions. The Education Service Centers receive an ESA Basic Services Initiatives grant. The grant for this past year focused on providing ESCs, providing LEA equitable services, training and technical assistance and guidance in the areas of PNP equitable services requirements for Title I Part A and those programs under the Title VIII. ESCs also provide LEAs assistance with the ESA Consolidated Grant Application, which is the PS 3099 Private School Schedule, and the PR 3099 is the ESA Consolidated Compliance Report for the private school. They also provide support and guidance to LEAs who are selected for PNP Equitable Services random validations. Collaboration with the statewide ESA Title I Part A Capacity Building Initiative, which is located in ESC 20. Here you can see their website. They provide additional resources and documents and tools statewide that represent TEA and federal requirements that are supportive of those LEAs providing services to private nonprofit schools. Effective consultation, collaboration, and expected outcomes. The goal of consultation. Successful consultation begins well before the implementation of services, establishes positive and productive working relationships, makes planning effective, continues throughout implementation, and serves to ensure that the services provided meet the needs of eligible students and teachers. What educational outcomes would you expect if meaningful LEA PMP consultations and strong collaboration are made a priority? Some examples could include increased student achievement for private school students, increased strategies and production for private school teachers following professional development opportunities, being able to have an easier transition for private school students and families as they enter a public school later in their education, and an ongoing dialogue between not only private school officials and students, but also that ongoing dialogue between the LEA and private school parents when equitable services are received. Those are just a few of great educational outcomes that one could expect. Here you can see some PMP staff collaboration, professional development and support, teachers and private school officials, as well as public school officials, ESC members, meeting together, planning staff professional development, and offering support. We also have student collaboration and achievements. LEA should celebrate the successes of private school students and ensure that they're collaborating with staff in the private school to ensure that students are receiving the recognition that they should receive in the private schools, as well as meeting the objectives and outcomes that the private school has intended through the use of equitable services. Carryover of PNP equitable services. May an LEA carry forward Title I Part A and Title VIII program obligated funds, despite the statutory requirement regarding obligation of funds? The USDE response is that if an LEA is providing equitable services and meeting the obligation of funds requirements, a private school generally should not have any, or certainly not significant carryover. However, the statute does not prohibit carryover of funds for equitable services. So a private school may be able to carry over equitable services for the following year. What are examples of circumstances that could result in equitable services program carryover? One example could be if the private school eligible children in one or more private schools have services delayed based on some extenuating circumstance. And then as a result, the LEA is unable to fully provide the equitable services that were generated for those private schools. And then some of those funds for equitable services are unobligated at the end of the federal fiscal year. In that case, the LEA must use the Title I Part A and Title VIII funds to provide equitable services to the eligible children in those particular affected private schools the following year. That is, if this specific situation had occurred. Another example of the use of equitable services carryover would be if an LEA used a third-party contractor to provide equitable services and the invoiced amount for those services was less than anticipated. And because it occurred late in the summer, the LEA is unable to obligate the funds prior to the end of the fiscal year for the private school. In that particular situation, the LEA, in consultation with the private school officials, must use the Title I Part A and Title VIII Program Equitable Service Funds for the following year to provide services in those affected private schools. However, if after consultation following this particular circumstance, those private school officials decline services, the LEA must add the Title I Part A funds to the proportional share available for equitable services to other private schools the following year. If there are no other participating private schools with Title I Part A services the following year, then those equitable services funds may be used to provide Title I Part A services in public schools. Reasons for Title VIII programs equitable services carryover. If, for example, with Title VIII, the services cost less than what was budgeted for, or the private school decided not to participate as planned or decline some of the services that they had intended on participating in, if that situation were to occur under the Title VIII programs, and the LEA and private school officials agree there are no additional services that are needed, any Title VIII program equitable services carryover funds become part of the general pool of funds that are available for expenditures in the public schools, and participating private schools may receive equitable services for the next year. And generally, in order to divide the pool for public schools and participating private schools in the area of Title VIII programs, the LEA uses a per pupil amount. New and updated P&P resources. The P&P Equitable Services webpage shares a lot of documents, templates, and requirements for the ESA Equitable Services. Near the bottom of the page, you will be able to see federal statute guidance and resources. Here, the district or private schools can look at any of these hyperlinked documents to be able to read up on what the particular equitable service requirements are for particular programs. So for example, you can check to see what the equitable service programs, equitable services are available under the Title I or Title VIII programs. Also, you may look at the Title III guidance and non-regulatory guidance for fiscal changes to read about equitable services requirements in those particular programs as well. In addition, TEA has a private nonprofit program guide. On the screen, you can see a sample of table of contents where it shows what is included with that program guide. The program guide provides requirements and information that is needed in order to have a successful equitable services program within those participating private schools. TEA also publishes frequently asked questions, as you can see examples on the screen of those questions that come into TEA. And so, for example, there are sections in this FAQ for carryover of equitable services, pooling of funds, technology for private schools, how to handle REAP and transferability, as well as different requirements for all of the title funds. You may find the frequently asked questions posted on our website. The affirmation of consultation form is also posted on our website. You may also download the affirmation of consultation form from the ESA reports system. You may download the report and you submit it through the same ESA report system. All affirmation of consultation forms are due September 30th annually. On our website, we have revised instructions for completing affirmation of consultation forms with private nonprofit school officials. This is a great place for all LEAs to start as they begin to look at how they will work with private schools and how to complete the affirmation of consultation form moving forward. You can see a sample of the content that is within the instruction booklet. We share the equitable services requirement, how to prepare for the consultation meeting, how an LEA needs to document that consultation. We also share information on shared services arrangements, SSA members, and fiscal agents, as well as pooling across LEAs. Another new resource that we have posted is the Equitable Services Companion Guide. Within this guide, you can see that it focuses on Title I Part A, participating private school information, where it will walk you through the same measure of poverty used to count public school children, what you need to do in your conversation for that particular area. It's a document that the LEA would use to walk them through consultation and sharing what documentation is needed, the information that they need to share with private schools as well. And here is an example that you would see inside this companion guide that shows the methods of data used to determine low-income students at participating PMP schools. And it walks the LEA through all of the documentation that is needed to prepare in providing equitable services for private schools. The methods of collecting low-income information for Title I Part A Proportional Share Handbook shares information on calculating the Title I Part A shares for equitable services. This is a great document to be able to go to and be able to use it to help explain how an LEA has come up with the Title I Part A equitable share or proportional share with the LEA, with the private schools. The Title I Part A Capacity Building Initiative has a newsletter from fall 2022 that focuses on supplement, not supplant. Here is a sample of that newsletter where you can go and learn more about equitable services and how it must supplement, not supplant, equitable services across all programs. We have also published a spring 2023 newsletter that focuses on the carryover of equitable services. We hope that you would take time to look at these newsletters that are posted and be able to learn a little bit more about equitable services in different areas. And we will have different hot topics throughout the school year that we will focus on, and we will share a short newsletter about that hot topic. We encourage LEAs to share these newsletters with their private schools and share it with other staff. It's just a short summary of how equitable services may be used depending upon the hot topic of that particular newsletter. Participant support costs are located in the Department of Grant Compliance and Administration EDGAR Forms WorkApp system. The purpose of this form is to provide required approval to all TEA grantees that expend federal funds on the provision of equitable services to private nonprofit schools. And now I'd like to share a few PMP frequently asked questions. One of the most popular questions that we receive at TEA is what ages must be used when entering LEA and PMP student enrollment data on the ESA Consolidated Federal Grant Application PS 3099 private school schedule to determine the PMP equitable services. As you can see, we have various ages, and so for the Title I Part A, Title II Part A, and Title IV Part A, the ages used to determine equitable services are ages 5 through 17. However, for Title I Part C Migrant, Title III Part A English Learners, and Title III Part A Immigrant Children, the ages used for determining equitable services start at age 3 and go through age 21. May an LEA impose a reasonable deadline on private school officials to facilitate meeting the obligation of funds requirement? The answer is yes. The LEA is the one responsible for ensuring that all funds are obligated in a timely manner. So if a deadline is established during consultation and in the context of that requirement to obligate funds generated for equitable services in the current fiscal year, it would be reasonable for the LEA to inform private school officials that if the deadline is not met for obligating funds and the private school has not notified the LEA of different obstacles in meeting the deadline, the LEA may consider that the private school has declined services. Is the district required to pick up supplies, materials, and equipment from participating PMP schools during extended breaks and during the summer? Yes. If there is an extended break or summertime when the materials and equipment are not being used, the district should pick them up, inventory those equipment, supplies, and materials, and check for any needed repairs before reissuing them to the PMP at the start of the next instructional setting. Please note, supplies and materials that are considered consumables are not required to be picked up. How is equipment defined by federal statute? Equipment means tangible personal property having a useful life of more than 1 year and a per unit acquisition cost which equals or exceeds the lesser of the capitalization level established by the non-federal entity for financial statement purposes or $5,000. These are part of the things that fall within the equipment area that must be picked up during extended breaks. Supplies are defined as tangible personal property other than those described in the definition of equipment. You may see more information about computing devices and equipment in the CFR Title II, Subtitle A, Chapter 2, Part 200. Many times I am asked, are there websites that an LEA may search in order to locate Texas private schools? Yes, there are several outreach methods an LEA may perform to search for private schools and private accrediting agency websites. However, a district must realize not all private schools may be listed on a website or eligible for Title Program Equitable Services if they're listed. Therefore, the LEA must use multiple private school outreach methods, such as posting in a local area newspaper, searching local directories for private schools, emailing those private schools that you do know of, sending postcards or letters through postal mail to reach those private schools that you do know of within your boundaries, and to keep that documentation on file for auditing purposes. An LEA must ensure a private school has documentation of nonprofit status, and that means it meets requirements for eligibility to receive equitable services. Now I'd like to highlight a few 2023 statewide virtual training sessions. These are a few training sessions that occurred in the month of June. These are training sessions that have links where you may click on those links and go back and view presentation slides. You may also view the recordings of these presentations, as well as frequently asked questions on some of the presentations. You may also view other documents on the TEA PMP webpage, the statewide ESA Title I Part A Capacity Building Initiative by Region 20, and the USDE Office of Non-Public Education. TEA contact information. If there are questions that you have, you may contact the Federal Program Compliance Division. The PMP Ombudsman information is on the screen, as well as the division phone number and division email address, which is pnpombudsman@tea.texas.gov. Thank you for attending.